hasn't changed the time.
Well, he started in later.
Yeah.
Oh, you would think. They would say like 5.
You know, I don't.
Oh, I checked on those books.
Yeah.
Threw them away.
Can you please?
It's 7 o'clock, and I call this Gardner Electric Advisory Board meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's not on our agenda, but if anyone in the audience would like to come up for public comment, you may do so now.
Do I have to be official? And my name is Debbie Hickman at 848 South Sumac in Gardner. I have a couple kind of questions, I guess, more so. Some time back, and it has been a little while back, I read, and I may be using layman's terms, a rate reclassification study, or a study where rates were reclassified. And if I read that correctly, once they proposed reclassification, there was a 3.7% reduction that possibly could be offered to residential electric customers without making any kind of an adverse effect in the revenues associated with the reclassification. I do remember sitting at a meeting where they talked about they were going to discuss it as in terms of a reduction to the customers, but because of all of the things that were going on about that time, decided to table it. So I was just wondering about that 3.7% possible reduction to the customers based upon the rate reclassification. Second is about the reserve funds. Was there something built into our rate per se that allowed us to build these reserves? And I don't know whether that was a percentage in the rate. I can't really find out how these reserves were built, but I do know that as of June 13th, now I don't know the last time that there was anything added to these numbers, these reserves, but the one entitled Electric Fund was $3,268,482, and the one Capital Replacement Reserve Fund was $3,020,137, which means we've hit, if I'm understanding correctly, the $3 million goal for each of these reserve funds that I believe was kind of a goal of the original committee. So first thing I think is there a rate reduction somewhere there, because we're no longer having to find the revenue to feed these funds. I don't know how these funds got to this account. I do know that in the past, when I have asked questions of the finance department with anything to do with EUB, it became quite a conversation. And I don't know that a lot of these things are written down anywhere to request them as a document through Kansas Open Records Act. So I'm at kind of a loss as to how to get some of these answers when I don't know where things are. I don't know there's any documents to request. So I'm hoping maybe you all could at least tell me where to go to find this information, because I don't see anything on the budget that actually tells me line item, this amount of money came from here to go to here. I'm not understanding that. I'm not finding that. So I find it difficult to follow through the budget scenarios. So how can you gentlemen help me with those two issues?
Okay. Let's start with the first one.
Okay.
The 3.7% was a possibility. We had a subcommittee that had looked at rates for months, and then that subcommittee turned over some people and we were looking at them again. At that point in time, we were looking at a couple of things. That reduction that you're speaking of. There was also talk of changing a classification and eliminating one customer class that has about want to say about 200 customers. And that was going to require more investigation and analysis. At that point in time, we were meeting in the subcommittee discussing it, and then everything went to, well, do we have status, can we make this decision, and we put it on hold, you know, should we be paying money because we are using services? So that hasn't actually been readdressed.
Okay.
At this point in time, it would be a suggestion from us anyway if we brought that up to the council. It won't be us making a decision anymore. So there's that. The reserve funds, there's not actually a specific item in the budget that says this goes to the reserve until we make that transfer, which is usually just once a year. There's nothing built into the budget that says we're going to have this as a line item. So in other words, we look at the budget to obviously break even or make a slight profit. We look at that over a 5 to 10 year period, depending on what we're looking at. Normally, we look very closely at 5 year, we look less closely at a 10-year window, so that we know if revenues stay about the same with, there's a projected model, and tells us with a, you know, you put in various numbers for growth and anticipated cost increases, and we see if we do nothing but continue on where we're at, where do those numbers go? And then over that period, we see, well, if that year's going to be lower, we'll let this ride a little bit longer, so on and so forth. So there's no real line item that will spell out and say, here it is. Or if you're looking for something on your bill, there's not, like a sales tax item, there's not a to the reserve fund. In other words, we built it up by keeping expenses low and taking the profit of a given year and socking it away into the reserve funds.
So whatever you didn't spend towards budgeted expenses, that was a profit at the end of the year, that in its entirety would have gone and been divided among
That would have
the
been
funds?
chosen amongst us. We would have voted at the time to decide where it goes and how
Okay,
much.
so there isn't anything built into a rate, so to speak, or there wasn't any additional something in the rate that would allow this fund to build? It was just strictly whatever was the profit at the end of the year after expenses?
Correct.
Okay, very good. That answers my question.
We do have formal policies.
Right, and we do have formal policies, or
That will tell me how that's transferred
I
and
don't know
everything?
if those formal policies are
Probably
still
not
valid anymore, but we had formal policies as to how we generated those two numbers. They're not both actually 3 million.
Okay,
Not the values, but the
Okay.
policy.
okay,
So one is a $3 million, and that's the operating, or the capital improvement or replacement fund. That's because
yes.
we took guidance from KMEA and other financial organizations with the Fiscally Fit seminar, 2 years ago, and took our largest single item that could go down that we need to replace. Well, that's a turbine for us. It's $3 million. So that's how that number is approximately $3 million. The other one is a calculation, and it's done every year with the budget. So you take this budget number, and there's like 8 different variables that go into it, and it tells you what we should have in reserves in case something happens.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you tell me, was there any transfer made at the end of last year into either of these funds where they go? Do you know, were there any transfers made at the end of last year?
If there was, we weren't voting on it, so I'm not sure we
Okay.
saw it. It would have been done internally probably.
Okay,
It'd probably be a question for the finance director, to be honest.
If you
Okay.
permit me, I would be happy to talk to the finance director and get back with you.
I would like that, because
It probably might take to the middle of the week for me to get back with you.
I'm in no hurry. It's been this long, so I'm in no hurry. I appreciate the fact that you would do that.
And if you could give Amy your phone number,
Sure.
I'd be happy to contact
Well,
you.
thank you all for listening to me. I appreciate it. Thank you for your help.
Anyone else have anything? Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Item number 1 is the standing approval of the minutes as written for the meeting on June 5th. I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So passed. New business. Item number 1, election of board chairman. Mr. Green, would you like to run with this?
I think since, we do not have a chairman, it would be up to you all at the first meeting after we are missing a chairman to, basically select a, member amongst yourself and, elect him as chairman and then, possibly vice chairman.
Discussion?
Make a motion for Mark Baldwin to be chairman. Second.
You know I don't get a vote, right?
I think you have the most experience, among the, especially among the members that are here besides Lance.
With Lance as the former chairman.
Right, Lance already had his turn in the seat, he's a logical choice.
I will accept the nomination. Any further discussion on that? There's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. So,
Now we need a vice
now we
chairman.
need to select a vice chairman. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, make a motion for Lee Moore for vice chairman.
Second?
Second.
No, I'm asking for a second.
Second.
Good. There's been a motion, any more discussion? There's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You vote for yourself. Aye.
Passed unanimously.
I wasn't sure if I could vote for myself.
Sure you can. All right. New business item number 2. This one and the next one, I think, are gonna take a little bit
Right.
to get into.
Excuse me, I'm more comfortable talking from here than up there. A little background, we were notified, actually, I had contacted KMEA on another matter, and, they said, oh my gosh, I'm glad to know who to talk to, because we weren't sure who to talk to, but what had happened